Okay, guys, this is Awesome John 22 signing on again. Coming straight out of my last review, which was of a My Little Pony figure, and trying my best to salvage as many of my very few viewers as I actually can. We are looking at a Transformers Prime figure today, a Voyager class figure, Thundertron, from the Powerizers line. He is the heroic, villainous leader. Hold on, let me Google him for a second. Okay, so here we go. Thundertron is the villainous leader of the Star Seekers and is the captain of the Tidal Wave, which I guess is a space pirate ship. That's pretty cool. He calls himself the mightiest freebooter on the spaceways. Don't know what that means. Let me scroll down. Okay, so apparently Thundertron was a completely unknown character until he was suddenly revealed at the end of a book, and no one knew who he was, and the ending was really underwhelming, and yet Hasbro expects us to really like him, and so they made a figure of him. Okay. But he's a pirate, so that kind of makes up for all that. And setting my computer aside, let's get a look at the figure itself. As you can see, Thundertron is a lion, and a pretty good looking one too. He's a little thin in the tummy area, but overall he's pretty cool. He's got a cool mane, cool crest on his head. Turning him over, aside from the gap there that is obviously meant to pop out and be part of a robot, there's not a whole lot of robot kibble on this guy either. Zoom in for a second. You can see what I guess is the Star Seeker logo, which looks kind of like a cross between a Jolly Roger and a Autobot and a Decepticon logo, which is pretty cool. I know when this guy came out, because not much was known about him when he first came out, that a lot of people, not that much is known about him now, that a lot of people thought he was a preview of Beast Hunters, and obviously that is not the case. He is a completely separate character. I also like how the color from his mane carries into his body. That's entirely off topic. Really, and I also realized I've mistransformed him a little bit. These are supposed to be back here. So, yeah. I'm not going to do it on both. But yeah, he's a good looking figure. I really enjoy the way he looks. Just because I don't know the character doesn't mean anything. I can still enjoy the figure. And I know he was a bit of a shelf warmer for a while. I didn't buy him. I didn't pick him up until I found him on clearance for, I think, $12 rather than the $21, $22 that Voyagers usually go for. And I'm happy that I got him cheaper, but I actually kind of wish I'd gotten him earlier on. I really enjoy the figure. He does come with a weapon, and because he was a Powerizers figure, this weapon used to be a Powerizer weapon, but if I ever get to any of my other Powerizer figures, the reviews of them, you'll see I always remove the Powerizer gimmick from the weapons. Because as you can see, this is a cool looking weapon. It's kind of a pirate's sword, which would be oriented this way, even though this edge is clearly the blade, which means it would be oriented this way. Kind of like how Transformers Prime Optimus has a reversed looking blade, which I like that. That's consistent. Clear plastic, and it does move, so it can kind of be on standby or swish into place. And to show you a little bit about, like, to kind of show you what I did to this weapon, this is just the battery pack that was in the Powerizer light up bit of the weapon. Put it next to the toy itself. That's big. That's a big box of absolutely nothing that didn't need to be there. So what I did is I cut it off and removed this because it has some batteries and some LED in it that I thought I might get some use out of eventually if I ever modded anything else. And went in here where the gear used to be. And you're not going to be able to see that. Let me see. There we go. You can see here there's a little disc that isn't clear. what I did is I took the gear mechanism out, which was attached to the thing that was surrounding this, and removed the cross joint. Whoops, dropped it. Removed the cross joint, removed the blade, and took a disc that was actually in the gear mechanism, like a little disc with a hole in it that was in the gear mechanism, inserted it in there, and then inserted the cross joint back through so that it would have less clearance and there would be more friction, and the blade would hold itself into place without the gears. And then removed the entire gearbox and LED assembly altogether. And this is what you get. It's a much smaller, much more compact weapon. I really enjoy it. You will see how that plays into the figure itself once we get to the figure itself. Let me turn the light off because it's going to get in the way. The figure itself, being a beast transformer, it doesn't have a huge amount of articulation. It has actually less than you might expect. The lower legs move, but due to the nature of the transformation, the upper legs don't, and I will show you why in a minute. But the rear legs do move, and the feet move. But even though these are the robot legs and they go all the way up to here, this part doesn't move because there is a tab in these wing bits that tabs into the thigh. Let me zoom in and see if I can show you that. You can see it right there. That keeps them from moving, as they probably shouldn't move too much. You can kind of get some movement there, but that's about it. So overall, not that impressive. His mouth doesn't even open. It is fixed. But he is a good-looking lion, and especially from kind of like a three-quarters view like this, he looks really cool. Good paint apps, good gold paint on his snout. You can see good clear plastic in his eyes, good paint there on the stripe. Everything is crisp and clean with crisp edges. Good gold paint on the leg. Good silver paint on this leg. The legs are different, and you'll see why in a minute. Good coppery paint, which you don't see much on here, with gold in the middle, leading into the claws, which are gold plastic, which bothers me slightly because gold plastic has been known to have issues, but it's very little, and you don't move them much, so I'm not that worried about it overall. You can even see a really good gradient pattern moving from the blue into the silver on his wing bits and on his back, which I really like. I think that's very cool looking. His tail, while we're zoomed in on it, is just rubbery plastic, but it seems to hold together pretty well. Overall, I love the beast mode of this guy, and as much as I love the beast mode of this guy, you may be wondering, well, is this just the better mode? No, I think this guy looks great in both modes, and we're going to take a look now at his robot mode. First of all, we're going to look at the legs, take these, move them out, and while we're here, I do want to point out one other minor issue I have with this figure. There are some stress marks on the female side of the ball joint in these side panels, which does frighten me slightly. I don't know if that's a QC issue on my figure or if that's a general issue, so if you guys do pick this guy up, keep an eye out for that. Coming down to his feet, though, we're going to take this bit here and fold it out, then take these, which should be folded back on both sides, and fold them forward to make a wider foot. We're going to straighten out the legs, and we're going to rotate them around at the shin. Rotate them around this way. Don't do it the other way like I did. And then come down and rotate the feet. Which, oops, oh no, that foot popped off! How horrible. No, that's supposed to happen. No, and you'll see that in a minute. Let me adjust my light. Yeah, that's actually supposed to happen, and it's awesome. You'll see. It's really awesome. Next, we're going to come back here to the lion's butt. We are going to accordion it up and back so that we can slide the hips in. And then we bring down these side panels, and he looks like he's now wearing a long coat, which is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen on a Transformer ever. So we're going to stand him up. And yes, he does stand on the footless leg. And we're going to come up here, and this is why these arms, well, these legs actually do not move, because we come here and you can see it's tabbed in right there. You're going to separate this piece and separate this piece and bring it around. This is actually two pieces that make up the leg, and these upper pieces, these wider ones, once you straighten them out and bring them out, actually make the arms of the robot mode, and that is just really cool. I love that. It's kind of one of the biggest selling points of this figure, in my opinion. Do that on both sides, of course. Straighten this out. Help if I did it on camera. Straighten this out. It's hard. These are very thick joints, or stiff joints, I mean. And bring it out. And you've got his arms, and you can see this springs out to fill in his abdomen. Now we come up here to the head, and we try not to break it, which I almost did. And we'll get to, there is one issue I do have with this figure, which we will get to in a minute. Bring the head down to make the chest, which also reveals the robot head up here. You can see it. Separate the mane, like so, and then bring down the crest, and then straighten everything out, and there's his head. And let me zoom in on his head for a minute. He has a beard, and that is also very cool. Now finally, we're going to take what were the lower parts of his front legs, rotate the feet around, fold this up, and bring it down onto his shoulder. We're going to do the same thing over here. And it gives him kind of these big shoulders, which are very cool looking. And there you have, if I can get him to stand from behind the camera, which is, I'm not going to, am I? This is going to be embarrassing. Oh, there we go. There you have Thundertron in robot mode. Readjust my light again to get a good look at him. And my lights are really not doing this guy justice. Hold on. There we go, that's better. And he looks just so cool. He's got, I mean, all of his paint apps carry over from his other mode. That's a little better. All of his paint apps carry over from his other mode. He looks piratey. He even has a peg leg, which I can just not get enough of. And, I mean, he's got the clear blue in his arms, which is a little annoying. But he overall looks great, and looks like the lion mode. Looks are kind of the best thing about this figure, and I'm going to tell you why now. Because looking at his torso, he has a ball joint in his shoulder, a rotation joint here, a swivel joint, and kind of a transformation joint here, which gives him kind of wrist articulation, but not really. But there's a bit of an annoyance here. His shoulder, it can kind of move, but you have to be really careful moving it because it will brush against all these other parts and force them around, and it gets really annoying having to straighten everything else out afterwards. He also has full range of movement in the hips, rotates at the thigh, bend at the knee, and one articulated foot. But again, there is an issue there. This bit here keeps wanting to fold forward, like so, as you're posing him. I don't like moving these because of the stress marks, and there is absolutely nothing to keep these hip pieces slid into place. There is no tab, no friction or anything, so they will slide out very, very easily. So, kind of a fragile figure, I guess you would say. But he is so good looking, if you intend him to be a display piece, frankly, I think you're going to be pretty satisfied. In terms of weapons, in the images of him, we see him with a claw on each forearm. And what you do, his primary weapon is, of course, the sword, which, if you put it in standby mode and plug it into his forearm, it gives him a claw on one forearm. So it's half of the stock footage, or the stock images, rather. And that looks pretty cool. So where does the claw on the other arm come from, you may wonder? Well, it comes from this, his other foot. There was a peg here that was acting as the heel of the foot. You can fold it down. And what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to plug into, if I can get it to plug in, to the other arm in the same place as the primary weapon over here. But it is flimsy as crap. And I know for a fact that that is my figure alone. That is not a problem with the figure itself, as I've seen other reviews where they have plugged it in here and it's had no problem. So what I do, until I can thicken that joint a little bit, or that peg a little bit, I mean, is I just plug it into his hand. And I think that looks pretty good. He looks pretty freaking good. He's a good looking figure. He's just a fragile figure. And I think that's why this guy didn't get any more good press than he did when he first came out, because people realized pretty early on that he was a pretty fragile figure. However, I do wholly recommend this figure. He is a leader of another faction, which we may eventually get other members from. He looks great, and he's on clearance pretty much everywhere that still sells him. So, I mean, if you're looking to get a Transformer that's a little different, a little unique, I would say pick this one up. He's pretty cool. Moving him back a bit so we can get some more figures in frame. As he is a leader of a faction, let me straighten his legs a little. As he is the leader of a faction, I thought I would bring in some other faction leaders for a size comparison. Here we have Transformers Prime Voyager Megatron. You can see he and Thundertron are about the same height. Megatron might actually be just a little bit shorter, but that's only really because I have Megatron's legs spread a little further than they probably need to be. So yeah, they're actually about the same height. You can actually, real quick, get a glimpse at one of my other Powerizers works. I removed the gear mechanism and increased the friction in this weapon as well, so that its blade is fully posable. But that's a whole other thing. Yeah, so there he is with Megatron, and here we have two different versions of Optimus Prime. Here is the RID Optimus Prime, and First Edition Optimus Prime. First Edition Optimus Prime is just a tad taller than him, just as he's also a tad taller than Megatron. And RID Prime is just a tad shorter than him, just as RID Prime is a tad shorter than Megatron. So overall, as a faction leader, I think this guy is scaled magnificently. He looks great on my shelf, though he doesn't really have a place on my shelf, considering that he doesn't have a faction to go with yet. But he looks good on my shelf with my other figures, and I'm really glad I got him. So I recommend, if you can find him relatively cheap somewhere on clearance like I did, which essentially half off like I did, pick him up. Definitely. If you can find something close to that and you like the way he looks, then pick him up. Yeah. If you just don't care, you just don't care. Don't worry about it. He's a pretty good figure, so I give him a pretty good review. This has been Awesome John 22, and I will see you next time on my review of a Marvel Universe figure.